Thank you, Belinda, for that very generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here this afternoon. It's a pleasure to see many of you today. I was working with my team on this effort last night, and we were a little bit panicky about the number of people that were registering, which is a really good place to be, I have to say. So we had to cut off the number of people who could come today. So it's really good to see an almost full room today. It's just a wonderful example, I think, of people supporting this idea of making connections. I'd like to thank the minister who's just left for opening the conference, and to all our guest speakers and panelists. But in particular, I'd like to thank Fred Olson from the ANZ Bank for your relationship with us. We have really gained a lot from the connection we've had with the ANZ Bank, so thank you so much. I'd like to start by sharing a little story. I think Fred and the minister spoke about the power of connections, and I'd like to share a story about just that, a story that highlights the value of the work that we are doing in this space. And this story is about a Chinese New Zealander who has lived in Auckland for over 20 years and who is the director of 3 businesses. His name is Robson Liang, and he is here with us today, somewhere in this room. I just met him before. In fact, Robson is a panelist in one of the knowledge exchange sessions that we'll be running later this afternoon, so you'll get to hear a little bit more from him then. Last year, Robson participated in our Connecting the Regions visit to Nelson. This is a project that we've been running with economic development agencies of New Zealand. On this visit, he saw a range of products and services, including a sustainable management institute, food and wine companies, and a high-tech science laboratory. Robson makes a lot of trips between New Zealand and China, as many ethnic business people tend to do. And from there, he went to China on one of his regular trips. And while in China, he spoke of his networks, to his networks about the potential he saw in New Zealand products and services. And of course, he received a very positive response. So through the connections he had in New Zealand and in China, he went on to establish a showcase of New Zealand products in the promotion center in Ningbo, China. There, products from New Zealand businesses can be accessed by the Chinese market. Ningbo was a deliberate choice because it is associated with SMEs, and this continues to be a work in progress. So Robson is an example of how a bridge can be built between Nelson and Ningbo. He will be talking later in the conference about the challenges and opportunities he encountered, so I won't steal his thunder at the moment, but needless to say, these efforts take a lot of energy and commitment. What I can say is he's a great example of the potential value of initiatives like we're doing today. He's a real example of the knowledge and experience on offer and the power of connecting people and ideas. So what is our vision here today when the Office of Ethnic Affairs set up this project called EPIC New Zealand? The vision of EPIC New Zealand brings together 3 things: connections, diversity, and business. We are here again this year because the relevance of this vision has not diminished one bit. I remember when we first started, people said, what are you trying to do here? Is it really going to work? Exactly what is it? Well, we have felt that this idea is gaining momentum. It has more and more currency every year. I want to be clear on the genesis of this vision because it wasn't something we dreamed up ourselves. We are here today because we went out and talked to a wide range of stakeholders in government, in the private sector, and in communities. And we heard a resounding message. We were told there was a gap in exploiting the value of New Zealand's diversity. Yes, New Zealand's diversity is a wonderful thing, but how do we exploit it in tangible ways? The gap was that there were not enough opportunities to connect mainstream and ethnic businesses. People told us they wanted more access to people links and a platform for connecting businesses and entrepreneurs. The business community in particular, many of you were involved in that consultation, said yes, there is immense value in this idea of creating a business networking platform. You confirmed this again at our EPIC New Zealand conference in 2012 because we did an evaluation and we got that feedback. It's also interesting that about a fortnight ago, I heard the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Mr. John Allen, who many of you know, and I have a great deal of respect for him. He gave a keynote address at our Ethnica Wellington conference. he emphasized the importance of people-to-people links in a globalized world, and particularly for a small country like New Zealand. And I think we would agree that a man in his position, with his vast knowledge of foreign affairs, certainly gives further validation to this viewpoint. So we got to work. We started the Epic New Zealand project, and we're growing it. And there are huge opportunities to be seized through these connections that we are beginning to broker. And Minister highlighted before the size of New Zealand's population relative to other nations. So when you start thinking about the populations of countries like China or India, it's easy to feel that New Zealand is disadvantaged because of its small population. And there are staggering figures that may justify this. For example, 200 of the world's top 700 cities will be in China in the next decade. These will require 97 new airports and 30,000 kilometers of new railways. Beijing is already projected to be the busiest airport in the world in a few years. By 2030, it is expected that India will have 68 cities with populations of more than 1 million people. But let me tell you, despite these staggering figures that we can see from overseas, the size of our population is more than compensated for by its composition. We have over 200 ethnic communities in New Zealand. New Zealand is one of the most diverse countries in the OECD. In fact, it's the fourth most diverse country. This diversity is our advantage. It is a resource waiting to be tapped into. Our migrants bring cultural knowledge and skills with them. They bring networks. They bring new ideas, and many of our migrants come from the most important current and emerging trade partners. So they are valuable intermediaries with their country of origin, and we should see them in that way, I would strongly suggest. The benefits and potentials here are obvious. Because of New Zealand's rich diversity, our pathways to the world markets are vast and virtually unlimited. But economic opportunities are only possible if we connect people. The question is, what are the most effective ways to do that? The channels, networks, and links are numerous. However, trade links with Asia, for example, they don't just appear out of thin air. They are carefully nurtured and grown from the bedrock of social, cultural, and political connections. We all know for this to work, New Zealand needs to be seen as an inclusive, multicultural country, and the government is certainly playing its role in that space. But apart from the relationships I just mentioned, we also need to find ways to literally meet. And I know Christopher Luxon, the CEO of Air New Zealand, will be with us today, later on, and I'm sure he will remind us of the importance of aviation links. People can't travel to connect if a lack of aviation services prevents them from ready access. So there are numerous ways to develop connections. Each one of those ways merits its own focus. And this conference is one important foundation stone of doing just that. The opportunities and the doors to success are right in front of us, and I think Fred rightfully pointed out that we need this help from every corner that we can get, and the migrant business community could be a key part of that. We just need to look in the right places, and we need to be in the right place at the right time. So by registering on the Epic New Zealand website, you are both looking and putting yourself in the right place so people can find you easily. And I understand there's an increasing number of connections being made on the website that we are monitoring. By attending this conference, you have increased the possibility of having that key moment of being in the right place at the right time and meeting the right people. So I applaud you for being here today. You're not only supporting your own business, you're supporting New Zealand in doing that. The Epic New Zealand database and this conference are about facilitating relationships and partnerships. They are about turning entrepreneurial dreams and visions into business reality. I want to conclude by saying that we have a strong message. It is, don't just grow your business networks. Increase the diversity of your networks and your workforce. That is a key ingredient for future success. In today's world, diversity is not just another thing on the side. It is the business imperative. And you would have heard the minister's speech before in which he referred to the Forbes survey that powerfully endorsed this viewpoint. We can prosper by staying ahead of the game, by being proactive rather than reactive. I urge you to take advantage of one of New Zealand's greatest assets, its ethnic diversity. Take advantage of the wealth of experience of our speakers and panelists today. I hope you have an enjoyable and very fruitful conference. Thank you very much indeed.